Before anime was a global juggernaut, it was a hidden treasure. You didn't find it through algorithms. You tripped over it by accident. You didn't stream it, it just happened to you. Maybe it was a ninja with something to prove, or a pirate with a grin too big for his face, or a teenager with a sword and too much responsibility. You didn't always understand what was going on, but you understood how it made you feel. That rush, that ache, that fire. And somehow, even the grainy visuals and odd dubs only made it more unforgettable. These weren't just shows, they were portals. Watching anime back then wasn't casual, it was commitment. You had to hunt for it. Friday nights felt like electricity, and Saturday mornings felt like a reward. You knew exactly when that theme song would hit, and you were ready. If you missed an episode on Toonami or WB's 4Kid, tough luck. You were out of the loop until someone brought a recording or recapped it at lunch. The viewing conditions, chaotic. You'd sit inches from the TV with cereal dust on your sleeves, one hand glued to the remote in case the commercials ended suddenly. Commercials hacked up your favorite scenes. VCRs were your best hope. Your sibling was your worst threat, but even through all that, you waited, you watched, and it stuck with you in the way most things don't. It wasn't high definition, it was high stakes. Anime didn't just pass the time, it etched itself into you. And in that golden glow of pixelated battles and friendship speeches, 4 giants stood taller than the rest. Naruto Uzumaki didn't have a perfect life. Heck, he didn't even have a normal one. No parents to hug him goodnight, no friends to share ramen with, just whispers behind his back and cold stares from an entire village that feared what lived inside him. He was a pariah, but he still dreamed. Dreamed of becoming Hokage, dreamed of being loved. What made Naruto unforgettable wasn't his flashy jutsus or his wild ninja antics. It was his heart, his grit, that reckless optimism that defied the very world that tried to crush him. Every time he got knocked down, he got back up, louder, scrappier, and somehow still smiling. In the early 2000s, Naruto hit differently. It wasn't just entertainment, it was emotional CPR for a generation that didn't have the vocabulary to describe their pain. But they understood a lonely kid sitting on a swing, waiting for someone, anyone to acknowledge him. They recognized the sting of being underestimated, the ache of trying to prove yourself when no one's watching. The early arcs weren't just missions and ninja battles, they were lessons. Naruto teaching Konohamaru to stand tall, the life and death fight on the bridge in the land of waves that made Team 7 realize this wasn't a game, the Chunin exams where every punch and counter told you who these characters were and who they were trying to become. And that was the power of early Naruto. Back then, anime wasn't polished or formulaic. It was raw, emotional. It dared to take you places Saturday morning cartoons wouldn't dare. No anime embodied raw style and swagger in the early 2000s quite like Bleach. That soundtrack, unforgettable. Those opening themes alone could raise the dead. The character designs, sharp, striking, effortlessly cool. And the premise? A teenager named Ichigo Kurosaki suddenly inherits the power of a Soul Reaper and must shepherd souls to the afterlife while battling monsters born from regret. Hollows. A high school student by day and an afterlife enforcer by night, sign me up. But Bleach wasn't just a stylish slice of life ghost hunting action. It was a story about shouldering invisible weights. Ichigo didn't want these powers. He didn't chase the sword. He accepted it when Rukia was injured, protecting his family. That's what made him different. He wasn't fighting for glory. He wasn't fighting because someone had to, because he couldn't stand seeing people hurt. And once the Soul Society arc began, everything leveled up. The series went from street brawls in the human world to political conspiracies, moral gray zones, and impossible duels in the afterlife's most ancient realm. Every new captain added complexity, each with their own twisted ideals of justice and duty. Characters like Renji, Byakuya, Urahara, and even Aizen became part of the cultural conversation. Not just because they look cool, but because their ideologies clashed in brilliant, terrifying ways. For so many, Bleach was the show that made them feel powerful in a world where they felt powerless, where life had bullies, anxiety, or broken homes. Bleach offered an escape. A reminder that even if your world is falling apart, you still fight for those you love. And those Bankai reveals, chills every single time. One Piece is the beating heart of shonen anime. At a time when everyone wanted to be the strongest, Luffy just wanted to be free and bring everyone he loved along for the ride. He wasn't chasing power, he was chasing adventure. And in doing so, he taught us that being king means protecting the people who sail beside you. In the early 2000s, Luffy didn't need grand speeches. He said everything with his fists, his laugh, and an ever-burning smile. Whether he was standing up to Arlong to free Nami from years of suffering, or declaring war on the world government by burning their flag just to save Nico Robin, Luffy was never about politics, he was about loyalty. His actions spoke louder than words, and every punch he threw hit like a promise. You're not alone anymore. The crew wasn't just a bunch of misfits, they were a family. Zoro swore loyalty with his life. Sanji cooked meals that healed wounds. Usopp lied to seem brave until one day he really was. And each new island brought more than just adventure, it brought hard truths. About racism, classism, slavery, freedom. About dreams so big they terrified you, but you chased them anyway. And as kids, watching the Straw Hats sail from island to island felt like we were growing up with them. Each crew member had a dream, and in them we saw reflections of our own. Maybe we didn't have a ship, but we had that same longing to be part of something bigger. While most anime of the time centered around friendship, honor, and relentless training arcs, Death Note walked in like a whisper and chilled your spine. It wasn't about powering up or protecting friends, it was about one boy, one book, and the terrifying idea that absolute power could live in your backpack. Light Yagami was a perfect student with a god complex simmering just beneath the surface. When he stumbled across the Death Note, a mysterious notebook dropped by a bored Shinigami named Ryuk, he didn't hesitate. He tested it, used it, and then built an entire moral framework around it. In a matter of episodes, he wasn't just a boy with a book. He was Kira, judge, jury, and executioner of the world's worst criminals. But Death Note wasn't just about Light. It was about the tension between two intellectual titans. There was L, the world's greatest detective, who saw through Kira's godlike facade with nothing but sugar, silence, and piercing logic. Their battle wasn't fought with fists or jutsus, it was fought with surveillance, deception, and psychological warfare. And the moment Light and L finally met face to face, that was cinema. Plot twists came like clockwork. Characters died suddenly, strategies flipped mid-scene, and every time Light smirked, you weren't sure whether to cheer or shudder. The show made you question your own sense of morality. Did Light have a point? Was L always right? Could justice really be so black and white, or was it smeared gray across every page of that cursed notebook? You watched not because you wanted explosions, but because you had to know what happened next. Every glance, every pause, every scribble in that black notebook made your heart race. The Elric brothers broke every rule to bring their mother back from the dead and paid a horrifying price. Edward lost his limbs, Alphonse lost his entire body. Their story was never just about getting their bodies back. It was about guilt, redemption, and what it means to move forward when you've seen the consequences of your actions. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood delivered the kind of emotional depth that left kids and adults alike stunned in silence. You couldn't walk away from Nina Tucker's fate without your worldview shifting, even a little. The show had bravery to make us feel uncomfortable, and that's what made it art. It wasn't just alchemy, it was philosophy. Equivalent exchange wasn't just a rule, it was a metaphor for life, for pain, for growth. Let's talk about the vibe, the aesthetic, the entire sensory package of early 2000s anime. Opening themes were unforgettable. You didn't skip them. You sang along to songs like Haruka Kanata or Asterisk like it was your national anthem. Soundtracks set emotional tones that Western cartoons rarely matched. Whether it was the eerie strings in Death Note or the melancholic piano in Full Metal, these melodies burrowed into your soul. Animation styles weren't overly polished, and that was what made them beautiful. Hand-drawn grit. Characters with imperfections, action sequences that felt chaotic and raw. Dialogue and dubbing, sure, not every English dub was perfect, but back then they added flavor, quirkiness, identity, and sometimes the weird translations made the scenes more iconic. Anime in the early 2000s didn't end when the credits rolled. It lived on your school backpack, your Game Boy, your shelves. You had Naruto headbands, Bleach posters, One Piece trading cards, and maybe a Death Note notebook, which probably got you in trouble at school. And for so many of us, these shows weren't just content, they were companions. They were part of our identity. Watching anime back then meant discovering a secret world, one that your classmates didn't always understand. But when you met another fan, it was instant friendship, like a secret handshake. Before Reddit threads, YouTube analysis, or TikTok edits, anime was something you felt. You didn't Google best anime fights, you discovered them by accident. You didn't know what was filler, you just watched, because back then anime wasn't content, it was an experience. You watched Naruto learning the Rasengan without knowing what a chakra tree diagram was. You saw Ichigo cross blades with Byakuya without understanding Bankai lore, but it didn't matter. You felt the power, the stakes, the pain. And in a world that was getting faster, more digital, more detached, anime grounded you in something emotional, something human. The early 2000s weren't peak anime because they were perfect. They were peak because they were real, messy, unfiltered. They found you when you didn't know you needed them, and they stayed. Even today, in a world with endless high-budget anime releases and perfectly marketed IPs, fans still return to those old shows. Not because they're better animated, but because they remind us of a time when discovering anime felt like discovering a part of yourself. So maybe that's why it hit different back then, because before the sub versus dub debates, before ranking power levels, before forums told you what to love, anime just was. You either stumbled into it or you didn't, but if you did, you never forgot it. Peak anime wasn't defined by viewership numbers, production budgets, or awards. It was defined by heart, by grit, by those rough drawn lines and emotional gut punches. You never saw those coming. Those shows didn't just give us stories, they gave us mirrors. And now, decades later, we look back not just to remember, but to reconnect with ourselves, with our childhoods, with the magic that started it all. So if you ever find yourself revisiting those episodes, don't just watch them, feel them. Because the early 2000s weren't just an era of anime, they were a gift.